The conversation has been loud. The headlines have been relentless. And yet, in the middle of all the noise surrounding, and something essential is being lost, not distorted, lost. Because what is being discussed as strategy, as leverage, even as emotional blackmail, is in reality something far more grounded, far more human, and far more difficult to dismiss when you truly examine it. This situation, centered around Harry's expected return to Britain for Invictus-related events and the question of whether his family will accompany him, is not about power plays. It is not about manipulation. It is about a line, a clear, unwavering line, that has been drawn around one thing: safety. Let's strip this down to its simplest form. As it stands, when travels to the United Kingdom, he does so under a very specific condition. He funds his own private security. That security, by law, is unarmed. It operates within limitations that state protection does not share. The difference between the two is not symbolic. It is operational, practical, and deeply significant. It determines response capability. It determines deterrence. It determines what happens not in theory, but in real time if something goes wrong. Now consider the other side of that reality. When he attends official events at the request of a different system activates. State protection becomes available. Armed security is present. Infrastructure is in place. The level of safety changes immediately, not because the risk disappears, but because the response to that risk is fundamentally stronger. That contrast is the entire issue. Because what he's saying is not complicated. He is not asking for special treatment beyond reason. He is not making abstract demands. He is pointing to a system that already exists and asking a simple question. If this level of protection is necessary in one context, why is it not considered necessary in another, especially when children are involved? And this is where the narrative begins to fracture. Because instead of engaging with that question, the conversation shifts. It becomes about motive. It becomes about tone. It becomes about whether he is using his children to force an outcome. But that shift avoids the core issue entirely. It replaces a practical concern with a psychological accusation. And that accusation does not hold under scrutiny. Because if we remove the titles, remove the institutions, remove the centuries of expectation, what remains is a father making a decision that says, I will not bring my children into an environment where I believe the level of protection is insufficient. That is not leverage. That is responsibility. There is a crucial detail that often goes unacknowledged. The decision over security is not in his hands. It is not something he can grant himself. It is determined by systems, by committees, by processes that operate independently of personal desire. So when it is said that it is all out of his hands, that is not a deflection, it is a fact. And yet, despite that lack of control, the expectation remains that he should proceed as though the outcome does not matter, that he should bring his family regardless, that he should accept the limitations and hope for the best. But hope is not a security strategy, and no parent operates on hope when it comes to the safety of their children. The suggestion that an invitation could solve everything adds another layer to this conversation. It is said that if we're to invite him to Sandringham, certain protections might automatically kick in. That possibility is presented as a solution, as though the issue is simply one of access or willingness. But even that idea carries complexity, because an invitation is not a guarantee. It is not a blanket assurance that every concern disappears. It introduces variables. Who will be present, what arrangements will be made, how security will be structured, and whether those arrangements meet the standard that a parent considers acceptable for their children. And that last part matters more than anything else, because this is not about whether a visit is possible, it is about whether it is safe enough. And safe enough is not a universal standard, it is personal. It is shaped by knowledge, by experience, by understanding of risk that may not be visible to the outside world. What seems acceptable to one person may not be acceptable to another, and when children are involved, that threshold becomes even higher. This is where enters the conversation, not as a background figure, but as a mother. because this is not a decision being made in isolation. It is a shared responsibility, a shared commitment to ensuring that their children are not placed in situations that could have been avoided. And avoidance in this case is not about fear. It is about control over what can be controlled, in a situation where so much cannot. There is also a deeper emotional layer that deserves attention. The idea that distance between family members is being used implies intent. It suggests calculation. But what if the distance is not a tool, but a consequence? What if it is the result of conditions that have not yet aligned? Because that changes everything. It transforms the narrative from one of manipulation to one of limitation. It reframes the situation not as a standoff, but as a pause that exists until certain requirements are met. Requirements that, at their core, revolve around one non-negotiable principle: the safety of children. And that principle does not bend easily. It does not adjust for optics. It does not shift for convenience. It remains fixed, even when it creates discomfort, even when it leads to misunderstanding, even when it is criticized. Especially then. The most telling line in all of this is perhaps the simplest. No father would want to put their kids at any risk. It is not dramatic. It is not controversial. It is not even debatable. It is a statement of instinct, of duty, of something that transcends titles and public roles. Because in the end, this is not about a prince. It is not about a king. It is about a parent making a choice that says presence is important, but safety comes first. A choice that says connection matters, but not at the cost of protection. A choice that says there are ways to make this work, but those ways must meet a standard that cannot be compromised. And that is where the focus should remain, not on speculation about motives, not on interpretations shaped by unnamed sources, but on the reality of the situation. A father willing to travel, willing to engage, willing to show up, but unwilling to bring his children into an environment he believes does not adequately protect them. That is not defiance. That is clarity. And clarity, in situations like this, is often misunderstood. It can be seen as rigidity, as stubbornness, as refusal. But in truth, it is the opposite. It is a clear communication of boundaries. A statement of what is required for something to happen, not to control others, but to ensure responsibility is upheld. Because once a line like this is crossed, it cannot be undone. If a risk is taken and something goes wrong, there is no rewriting that moment, no reframing it, no explaining it away. And that is the weight behind this decision, the understanding that some risks are simply not worth taking, no matter how strong the desire for connection may be. So as the conversation continues, as July approaches, as discussions about visits and invitations and security unfold, it is important to return to that central truth. This is not a game. This is not leverage. This is a father, alongside a mother, making a decision that prioritizes their children above everything else. And whether one agrees with that decision or not, it is impossible to deny the principle behind it. Protect the children. Everything else comes after.